Hey friends, this is Derrick Broze with the Conscious Resistance Network. And today we are going to talk about Iran, and we're going to talk about the potential for false flag attacks. Before we do that, I want to remind you guys, bookmark theconsciousresistance.com, scroll down here, sign up for our email newsletter, follow us on all of our alternative platforms, Steam it, the Discord channel, our Remind text app. You can follow us on YouTube or support on Patreon. And also, I would like to remind you guys that all this month we are promoting our Divest from Facebook campaign. Join Minds. You can come over here to minds.com/theconsciousresistance-network to get all of our latest content, including exclusive reports that we are putting on Minds first, including an article that I will have coming up later today. So get plugged in there. We're growing steadily. And if you want to support in other ways, you can always check out our shirts and buy some shirts. I've just shipped out shirt orders for people who have recently ordered some, so you'll get those coming soon. And yeah, let's dive into the news now. Why the U.S. suddenly decided to send an aircraft carrier and bombers to check Iran. In case you guys haven't heard about this at all, in the last couple days it was announced that the U.S. military was sending different aircraft carriers, massive machines, towards Iran because they said they had intelligence that Iran might attempt to attack the United States, which doesn't make any sense at all once you really look into it. This is one of the aircraft carriers, the USS Abraham Lincoln. Now it says the U.S. received credible intelligence that Iran was plotting an attack against U.S. interests, not against the U.S. necessarily, but U.S. interests, including U.S. military forces and civilians in the Persian Gulf. The Pentagon then approved a U.S. Central Command request for additional firepower, and the White House on Sunday announced the redirection of a U.S. Navy carrier strike group and a U.S. Air Force bomber task force to deter Iran with the threat of unrelenting force in response to an attack. Now, for those who've been paying attention, this is something that we've seen coming up, namely because of this man, National Security Advisor John Bolton, who's been around since George W. Bush's day, has long wanted to attack Iran. We also know, for those who are truth seekers and have been awake and aware, know that after 9/11, General Wesley Clark talked about how there was a plan to go into Iraq, Afghanistan, Sudan, Syria, and then eventually Iran. So they've been having this plan for like almost 2 decades, if not longer. And Acting Secretary of Defense Patrick Shanahan said this, quote, represents a prudent repositioning of assets in response to indications of a credible threat by Iranian regime forces. So this just gets into the details of that. As I said, they are coming towards Iran. But where is this intelligence coming from? The intel, according to Israeli media, appears to have come at least in part from Israel. So this couldn't have anything to do with how Israel and Iran are constantly going back and forth, and Israel and the United States have accused Iran of harboring terrorists that are going to hurt Israel. There's also been some hostile activity taking place between Iran and Israel in recent days, so this is more than likely this alleged Israeli intel is coming as a retaliation to Iran from Israel via the United States. Just another proxy war. And Israel supposedly had provided information on a possible Iranian plot against U.S. targets in the region or U.S. allies. Fox News confirmed this. CNN, citing U.S. officials, reported that intelligence suggested a possible attack on U.S. forces in Syria, Iraq, and at sea. So they're saying there's going to be an attack coming up. They're going to blame it on Iranians. We can go on further. Here you see the Atlantic. The many ways Iran could target the United States. The White House is citing unspecified threats. The specifics are murky, but the escalation potential is real. And again, they mentioned John Bolton. They mention Israel. Iranian forces or their proxies operate close by U.S. and U.S.-backed forces in both Iraq and Syria. Iran routinely threatens to disrupt the world oil trade through the Strait of Hormuz off its coast. Its aligned forces in Yemen and Gaza directly threaten U.S. allies in Saudi Arabia and Israel. So it's funny because this is what it's about. Threatening U.S. allies, Saudi Arabia and Israel. If the specific warnings about Iran's intent remain murky, the potential for Iran to threaten the U.S. and allies in the region is serious. Axios reported on Monday that the U.S. was responding to intelligence from Israel, though the Israeli embassy decided to comment. Now, what else do they have here? Iran is perhaps better positioned to harass American allies in the region, namely Israel and Saudi Arabia. Tehran supports the Palestinian militant group Hamas, which in recent days allegedly launched some 600 rockets towards Israel in the territory in the Gaza Strip. They're also saying that Iran could encourage the Houthis in Yemen to start targeting Saudi and Emirati oil shipments. You know how this is just poor, crappy journalism, because they don't give you any context here. It's just saying, this whole article is framed as Iran's the bad guys. They might hurt U.S. allies, namely Israel and Saudi Arabia. No context about the fact that Saudi Arabia has beheaded a 16-year-old kid in the last couple of weeks and crucified people, their own people recently. These are the type of nations that are our allies, and that's just going unquestioned in this report. Do you understand what I'm saying here? I'm sorry I just got a little loud and bitchy, but it's just so frustrating to see this garbage in the mainstream. It's only one-sided narrative that they push. The two countries have taken over Iran's market share following the imposition of U.S. sanctions. So what you have here is the U.S. implementing sanctions to prevent Iran from being able to do oil business and punishing countries who do oil business with them. And at the same time, supporting the Saudi-led war in Yemen, which has become one of the greatest humanitarian crises of the past few years, with hundreds of thousands of people dead, starving. I mean, it's just insane there. And they're also supporting Israel. Israel regularly is held, responsible, not actually held accountable, but people call them out for human rights violations. And those are the people that the United States and the Western military and media, compliant media, are so afraid that they're going to get disturbed. Now, I'm not saying Iran's perfect by any means, but this is obviously another U.S.-led coup, just like we're seeing in Venezuela. They're attempting to stage a false flag attack, or I guarantee you, if there is an attack now, I would not trust them if they say Iran decided to attack, especially after all this, when they're bringing the military over there. With this one, B-52 bombers added to the aircraft carrier strike group rushing to the Middle East to confront Iranian threats. So now they're adding even more weapons, even more missiles and planes, and just getting ready for this Iranian attack that they say may come. I don't know. We'll see. We'll have to see how this goes. Michael O'Hanlon is quoted in this article from the Brookings Institution, which if you guys know you're NGOs, then that name should set off alarm bells. He says, I like the decision to the extent I can understand the backdrop to it, because it tells Iran they won't get away with doing something nasty by proxy. We are on to them. That may or may not be sufficient as a deterrent. We have to be careful about assuming that a carrier or bomber can stop a covert operative. But I still favor it. So, we'll just have to see how this plays out. I think it's garbage, but I do want to emphasize, guys, if you've been following my work, not just here on the YouTube channel, because again, I tell you guys, I don't always make videos about my articles, but I do text them out. If you join our free text app list, which is underneath the description of this video, then you will always, always, always get my content, new articles, new videos, whatever. This is an article I wrote last spring, over a year ago, when Donald Trump first appointed John Bolton, and it was titled, clearly enough, Donald Trump's appointment of John Bolton means regime change is coming to Iran. The latest neocon warmonger to join the Trump administration does not bode well for the people of Iran. On Thursday, Donald Trump announced that John Bolton, the former official in George W. Bush's administration and former ambassador to the UN, would be his new national security advisor. Bolton, of course, was a war hawk who called for the invasion of Iraq in search of non-existent weapons of mass destruction, and has for years called for invasion of Iran. So his record is already bad enough, but I think that it's clear that the more you look into him, you realize that he's more involved in this than you might realize. In 2009, Bolton said that regime change is, quote, ultimately the only thing that will stop Iran from getting nuclear weapons. So he's made it clear, like, they're after regime change. As recent as 2015, Bolton calls for a joint bombing campaign from U.S. and Israel. Such action should be combined with vigorous American support for Iran's opposition aimed at regime change in Tehran. And Senator Ron Paul at the time quoted, "It concerns me that Trump would put someone in charge who is unhinged as far as believing in absolute and total intervention." So, with the combination of Pompeo and Bolton, this is pretty much a war cabinet. I think this has been said before. But what I want to point out to you most about this whole video here and this whole little article is that John Bolton has already made it clear. Him and former mayor of New York, Rudy Giuliani, have already promised regime change once they came into power. And this was reported by The Intercept last year. So this was back in 2017 whenever whenever Bolton first said that. Just 8 months ago at a Paris gathering, Just 8 months ago at a Paris gathering, Bolton told members of the Iranian exile group known as the Mujahideen Khalq, or MEK, or People's Mujahideen, that the Trump administration should embrace their goal of immediate regime change in Iran and recognize their group as a viable alternative. Quote, "The behavior and the objectives of this regime are not going to change, and therefore the only solution is to change the regime itself," newly appointed National Security Advisor John Bolton told the crowd. And The Intercept also noted that Iranian expatriate journalist Baman Kalbasi reported that Bolton ended his talk by promising, quote, "And that's why, before 2019, we will celebrate in Tehran." So he basically is telling these people, the MEK, who have been listed as terrorists by some people across the world, and I guess they're the group that they're choosing, just like Guaido in Venezuela. The MEK are the group that the United States wants to use to set up their proxy war and their puppet regime. And at a recent celebration of the Persian New Year, Rudy Giuliani promised the crowd that, quote, "If anything, John Bolton has become more determined that there needs to be regime change in Iran and that the nuclear agreement needs to be burned and that you need to be in charge of the country." Giuliani could be heard chanting regime change. And if you need any more evidence, it should also be noted that John Bolton is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, who continues to have influence on the world around us. And he was also a part of the Project for the New American Century, which you guys may remember was enthusiastically promoting the lie about Saddam Hussein's weapon of mass destruction, and also the Project for the New American Century, known as PNAC, in 2000, which Bolton was a part of, released a report titled Rebuilding America's Defenses, which outlined a strategy for regime change in Iraq and beyond, and pretty much seemed to predict 9/11. Under a section titled Creating Tomorrow's Dominant Force, they wrote, "Further, the process of transformation, even if it brings revolutionary change, is likely to be a long one, absent some catastrophic and catalyzing event like a new Pearl Harbor." And then less than a year later, 10 of the 18 men who'd signed that paper became part of the Bush administration and apparently got the catalyzing excuse that they needed to invade Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Syria, and more than likely soon Iran. So, yeah, guys, this is just part of the whole thing. And if you think about this quote from that article that says, "Thus this report," this is the same. And in addition to that well-known Pearl Harbor quote, one of the other things they described in that paper called Rebuilding America's Defenses, they said, quote, "Thus, this report advocates a two-stage process of change, transition and transformation over the coming decades." So maybe the last 15 years of war, violence, and death in the Middle East have been the transition phase, and now John Bolton and Trump are preparing to shift gears and move into the transformation phase, beginning with the invasion of Iran. We'll have to wait and see, but based on all the power players here, I think it's true. Not only is Donald Trump a part of the swamp, hopefully you guys have got that clearly by now, but also that he is part of the same agenda to force war into Iran at the behest, apparently, of Israeli intelligence. That's what they're going off of, Israeli intelligence that's leading the way, guiding them. Surprise, surprise. Yeah, so that's it, guys. Be on the lookout because there might be more propaganda coming your way, and they're going to tell you that it was Iran, and they're also going to try to tell you, as they've already tried to do, that Iran was responsible for 9/11. Iran's responsible for everything. It's either Russia, Iran, or Venezuela. If you want someone to blame your problems on to an American, that's probably the easiest thing to do. So check that out, guys. I will have more videos out coming later this week. And as I said, join Minds to get our exclusive content. We'll have a new article coming out later today that will be exclusively for Minds at first. So you don't want to miss that. And until next time, guys, remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free. And we can wake up more people. We can get past this nonsense, but it's going to take each of us working on our own trauma and seeking solutions. Stop coming here looking for just news and entertainment. Get involved in your community. Start pulling yourself out of these systems, and we can succeed. Until next time, peace.